Welcome to the Brookbanks webinar on unlocking grid capacity with LEMA. I'll probably end up saying Local Energy Markets Alliance once and then refer to them as LEMA going forward because it's quite a mouthful. We usually run these webinars as quite a sort of technical, in-depth half an hour going through some detailed slides, but I'm going to try and leave it a little bit more conversational between Ed and I today, with a bit more sort of chat and less slides. But we'll leave the slides on the screen just to prompt the discussion. So yeah, welcome to the webinar, and I am happy to be joined today. Oh, there we go. By Ed Hurford from LEMA. We'll do a quick round of intros. So my name is Matthew Capper. I'm Director of Utilities at Brookbanks, and I lead our utility consultancy function across the business. I have a team of around about 10 people, and we support clients with sort of various utility consultancy services, and largely focused on quite often on securing grid capacity for schemes, which is where I've come in contact with Ed. So, Ed, do you want to give a quick introduction to sort of who you are and where you are and how you've ended up at LEMA?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me. Good to be here. So as Matt said, my name's Ed Hurford. I've been in the industry, my experience in the industry, quite a long time now, over 25 years. Starting out in energy retail, so I spent quite a long time at British Gas, where I was Director of Infrastructure and led British Gas's smart metering programme. Smart metering has been a big thing for energy utilities over the last 20 years or so. And that involved working with an organisation called the Data Communications Company, which is a sort of national monopoly that runs smart metering services UK-wide now. And from British Gas, I moved to Data Communications Company. I spent the last 10 years or so there as Chief Customer Officer, responsible for various aspects of DCC's operations, and not least its engagement with key stakeholders, including energy suppliers, network operators, and a whole range of innovators who are busy using smart meter data and working with consumers to deliver innovative energy propositions. And the kind of common thread through all of that has been, of course, energy and technology, and the links between the two, and how those two can do interesting things. And that's led me on to really what I'm doing now. So for the last nearly a year now, in fact, I've been working with the team at the Local Energy Markets Alliance, LEMA, and really focusing on how to bring the LEMA proposition to life through a series of projects. And I guess we'll talk about what the LEMA proposition is in a minute. So yeah, that's a bit about me and my background.
Great, thanks, Ed. For those that have joined, we're going to just invite questions in the chat, and we'll pick those up at the end in a sort of short Q&A section at the end of the presentation. So do drop any questions into there as we go. So in terms of the format of the webinar, we just do a little bit of scene setting at the start, a sort of explanation as to why LEMA exists, I suppose, and what the sort of particular solution that we're going to talk about today is seeking to combat. And then largely over to Ed to a degree. So what is LEMA? How are they hoping to overcome grid constraints, and what's next, and how we can all sort of get involved with the alliance, and as I say, the Q&A at the end. So so moving through into network context, I am going to leave the slides up for this just because it sort of it doesn't work well with the system dropping and the slides up and down. But I am aiming for this to be slightly more conversational than sort of usual webinars. So there'll be sort of more talking and less slides on the screen probably. But yeah, so I think we are all struggling. I think at the moment, in terms of interactions with distribution network operators, to secure and deliver network capacity to schemes. Brookbanks work alongside a lot of large developers to try and deliver and develop strategies for servicing developments, whether they be residential or commercial, and we're all finding, I think, that there are significant challenges around providing that capacity to sites, be it sort of very long offsite cable routes, or be it significant sort of constraints upstream on larger pieces of infrastructure. And we've actually sort of ended up interacting with Ed's team as a result of those discussions with the DNO, and I think we'll come on to it. But there's LEMA's solution is quite interesting and different. Ed, do you sort of in your discussions with DNOs and with sort of customers and clients, I take it you're hearing a lot of similar complaints about sort of lack of availability of capacity and significant times and cost issues?
Yeah, and I mean, the LEMA context, as we look at it, electricity and energy demand is in many areas going up over time as the energy transition happens. More people are interested in low carbon technologies, solar, batteries, people moving to EV cars, moving to heat pumps, etc. And all of those put extra load on the grid to power them. And then you've got solar as well, of course, which can put load the other way through generation. And that stresses the grid. And you combine that with housing development, you combine that with business growth and commercial demand, and that's creating a lot of extra stresses on the existing electricity network, whether that's transmission and distribution level. And there's a lot of change going on, at the network level to try and address that. And working in conjunction with Ofgem, the regulator, the network operators have all got. First of all, they've got to whole manage their transition from being a network operator to a system operator and trying to do a lot more balancing of these different kind of loads at different levels. But they're also doing a lot of investment to upgrade their networks and cope with that additional demand. But that requires, that's a lot of physical work. Upgrading copper and pipes in the ground takes time, right? And there's upgrading transformers, etc. So there's a limit to the pace and the amount of money they've got to do that. And so you look at the kind of rising demand and then some constraints on the pace at which networks can upgrade themselves. And that, as you just said, is leading to constraints. And this is not like an average level thing. These are very local and site specific. So you end up coming down to, substation levels typically. And the impact of those constraints can be, for a new build, for a housing development, for example, often that there's a limited capacity available, which can slow, limit, or even stop development altogether. Until that, planned reinforcement works can be completed. And sometimes you can be waiting 10 years for that. So the challenge that LEMA's been created is to try and solve that burden.
Yeah, I think throwing into the mix, connections reform and other attempts at sort of legislative reform to support faster connections is sort of adding to the uncertainty at the moment. And I think obviously the outcome of those things is sort of pushing us in the right direction, and it is needed. But in the short and medium term, I think it's certainly adding uncertainty and complexity, I think, to a process that previously was maybe slightly clearer, albeit too slow, and needed the reform. So I think we're in a bit of a particular sort of pinch point at the moment where those challenges are all combining to make connection quite difficult. And I think, moving through into sort of what LEMA therefore are and what they offer, I think that probably is a good sort of point to transition into that. So I don't know if you want to speak initially to sort of the background of LEMA, what LEMA is, your sort of member partners and what have you, and then we'll move into maybe slightly more detail about the specific sort of solution that you're offering.
Yeah. So LEMA was, as it says on the slide, established several years ago now. It is an industry-led alliance. It's a not-for-profit organisation. We're not a trade body or a lobby group, and we exist. There are lots of different solutions out there in the market which exist. Right, the technology's there. They've been proven through sort of government-funded programme and research. Maybe talk a bit about that later on, but they're not scaled. Right, there's no market model to deploy those solutions to help and address the sorts of situations and the challenges we were discussing just now. So LEMA's been formed to focus on developing that commercial market for solutions to those energy constraints, and it exists for the benefit of its members. And the membership group we've got, as you can see on the right hand side, in fact there's several more members have joined since put this slide together, is really a range of different organisations. So you can see we've got some of the local authorities, Oxfordshire County Council, West Midlands Combined Authority, West Sussex, for example, all of whom have got all sorts of priorities. They've got their local area energy plans to do, and they've got lots of priorities in terms of local housing development. They've got technology and service providers in there, some consultancy organisations as well, all of whom can bring different sort of technical solutions to bear. We've got other organisations like Energy Systems Catapult as well, which is very interested in trying to find and sort of grow technology solutions which can then be deployed into the energy market. University of York as well, who've been extremely helpful in helping us get connected in with consumer response and learning about how to best engage consumers in this kind of technology and the sort of solutions available. So we've got a cluster of all sorts of different organisations involved. No developers at the moment, you'll notice.
Would you be welcome? Would you welcome developers? Yeah,
absolutely, we absolutely would. And in fact, outcome from this, one of the things would be great to have some developers involved. We'll talk a bit more about what the solution is in a minute, but we don't have an absolutely finished product yet. We'll talk about some of the project work we're doing, but it's really important here. There's a complex cluster of different stakeholders, right? And actually, that complexity is one of the reasons why solving this problem is difficult. And the more different stakeholders we can get represented, the better. So we absolutely would welcome having developers on board. So LEMA's been around for a few years now. Been working through expert groups, combined groups of members to develop the proposition, and then more recently, over the course of the last 8-9 months, through some site-specific projects, working with some developers on specific sites where these constraints exist today, to try and find a way and see how can the LEMA, the Smart Local Energy System solution, help to find a breakthrough to enable development for those for their sites.
It'd be interesting to talk, I think, about how LEMA sort of encourage or interact or manage the sort of competing interests of the various members, whether it's that LEMA have a sort of overarching focus that is sort of, and you're trying to guide all your members towards achieving that, or whether your members come into the alliance with their own individual goals and you sort of put the different parts together to help support each member organisation what they're trying to achieve. I am mindful to get to the solution, and I don't want to sort of overstep into the next slide, but it'd be interesting, I think, to understand how that sort of interaction, how it all fits together, I suppose.
Well, in honesty, it's a bit of both. We exist to serve our members, right? So we're not telling anybody what to do. We're not telling anybody what not to do, right? All of our members have got their own priorities, and we're there to try and help solve a problem. Now, that does involve trying to provide some leadership and drive to create a solution, because it's not just congealing out of the air all by itself, right? So that we are trying to provide some leadership here, but at the same time, the answer we're looking for is to provide the frameworks, the commercial frameworks, the networks of individuals working together that will actually enable this to work. So we're not telling our members what to do. We're taking information from them, but also providing some leadership too.
That's interesting. So I think to just lead into the next slide, from our perspective, we're often asked where there are significant grid constraints on schemes. What can we as a developer do? What can we as a local authority do to deliver more development within the constraint that they're experiencing, or deliver more efficient solutions for future residents, or various different targets. But and those largely fall into, I think, when we're talking to clients, traditional solutions, the Future Home Standard and transition to low carbon heating solutions is sort of largely, particularly for housing, has been air source heat pumps sort of driven on plot solutions, and alternatives in the market, at the moment largely fall into the category of some sort of alternative to that in terms of heating system. So some sort of centralized district heating system or a ground source heating system. Or a sort of smart microgrid style solution, and LEMA is none of those things, or neither of those things, albeit it falls closer to the kind of smart microgrid sort of solution. Albeit I think you're not a huge fan of me referencing or mentioning that, and it certainly isn't the same solution, but it is more in the kind of smart networked kind of load management solution space than it is provision of different kinds of infrastructure, I suppose. And I think with that context, it's probably worth sort of moving into you sort of explaining to us in a little more detail what that sort of solution is and how it works, I suppose.
Yeah, so good intro for that section, Matt. Thank you. So the kind of core of the LEMA proposition is really based around two things. One is what we call a smart local energy system. So this relies on a neighbourhood of homes, all within, let's say, one substation boundary. So they're all connected to one substation with low carbon technologies installed in those homes. So that could be the solar, heat pumps, home batteries, EV charging. And all those devices are networked together, so cloud connected, right? And they can then be operated in harmony. Today, even without the sort of smart local energy system, lots of people have got all these LCTs in their homes, and they can outsource management of those devices to a service provider that will optimize energy just for them in their own home, right? Their generation, their consumption against a smart tariff, etc. That's great. But what that doesn't do is optimize the energy profile of those homes to best manage the net consumption profile at the substation that they're all connected to. And that's what the smart local energy system can do. So that relies on two things. One is collective management of the overall profile of those homes throughout the day. So, you know, every typical home has a kind of half-hourly profile through the day and a couple of peaks. So one is that can be smooth. And the second part, which is really new, is called dynamic load averaging. And that, so if you imagine, you know, through the day, you've got half-hourly consumption profiles, but actually within a half an hour, whatever the average is for that half an hour, the load profile is not static at the average all the way through that half an hour. There's all sorts of peaks and spikes, and those peaks and spikes occur when different devices switch on or off at the same time, and you get either a spike when they all switch on, or a dip when they all switch off, or when generation kicks in. And those peaks and spikes are what can be really problematic when you add it all up across, let's say, 1,000 homes in a particular substation. Really problematic for the network operator and how much capacity they can afford to provide for connection before their transformers at risk of a trip or fault. So dynamic load averaging is applied to manage those short-term coincident peak loads. And you combine the averaging throughout the day with that peak load management, and you can dramatically reduce the profile of, and particularly the peak load profile at the substation. This is something that LEMA has been developing in conjunction with Scottish and Southern Electricity Network, so one of our members as well. And they've been developing a counterpart new connection product called Community Smart Access, which is designed to be the way in which you contract this kind of load management. And altogether, what this enables, this smart local energy system, DLA enables a network operator to contract with a service provider alongside providing the connection offer for the developer or for a retrofit application to provide secure capacity, right? They know that won't be exceeded because of the operation of the network, and provide capacity and provide a connection ahead of completing local grid reinforcement, where otherwise they may not have been able to.
Yeah.
So it's a really powerful way of benefiting, new developments or retrofit applications. It benefits the network through security on operating their local system. It benefits businesses and developers from being able to proceed earlier with what they want to do. And it benefits the homeowners and consumers through having these LCT assets installed in their homes and delivering, the energy cost benefits that you can get from having those assets working for you.
Yeah, and I think it's worth highlighting the differences there against the sort of other things that we see in the market, I suppose. So I think from to highlight to a developer, I suppose, the scenarios in which this makes the biggest difference, I suppose, other than just being in general the right thing to do, I think, and it should be the way that the system is run really, and is sort of the future just more generally. But from a sort of what does it do for me kind of thing as a developer, the things that this seeks to overcome mainly will be significant constraints at primary substations, at BSPs, that kind of thing, where we're getting really long delays for provision of capacity, where a DNO can look at it and say, well, actually, our main constraint at this substation is the peaks. Is it 5 p.m. or 7 p.m. or whenever the sort of most significant peak is, and LEMA's ability to deploy the almost peak lopping, I suppose, and reduction of capacity or reduction of demand at those key times, which allow them to fit the development within a sort of space in the load profile almost, and allow them to allow the delivery of that scheme well in advance of when they would have been otherwise.
Of the sort of scale of benefit. So project we've just done, we've not gone into kind of full detailed planning yet, but the indications are that with the level of capacity that the network can currently allocate for a 1,000 home development in North Bicester area, the developer would probably be able to get to something, instead of 1,000 homes, with the level of capacity the network's got at the moment, they'd probably be able to get to somewhere less than 90 homes before they reach the threshold of the capacity that the network can give them. So 90 out of 1,000 homes built, which is not really viable. The assessment we've done, looking at that same level of capacity from the network and having a DLA enabled smart local energy system, means we think they can get to something closer to 300 homes. So it's a significant increase. And you combine that when you get confidence in the management of load at the substation, there's significant potential for the network operator to say, well, actually, now there's less risk for me. I can actually allocate you more of my capacity. So we think they can actually get closer to 700 homes by operating the scheme. So you go from 90 to 700. So there's quite significant benefit.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to point out is, again, not wanting to labour the point on the smart microgrid stuff, but this is a system that's all behind the meter. It is a traditionally delivered system. There's some nuance about involvement of IDNOs or not, but it is a system that is a traditionally designed and delivered system. The interesting sort of complex, unique part of this is the load management behind the behind the meter, the fact that is network together in such a way that allows it to be deployed, en masse against the needs of the DNO, which is not something that is currently a sort of, as far as I'm aware, available in the market in other areas. So.
Exactly right, and there are some sort of corollaries to the idea of a microgrid. Where this is different to a microgrid is all of this operates on the public wires, right? So it's operating on DNO or IDNO owned infrastructure. There is no private infrastructure. There's no private wire microgrid installed here. And energy consumers are subject to the same, network connection conditions as any other energy consumer in any other standard home is, and they're also free to choose their energy tariff and their energy retail supplier as every other consumer is. So there's no lock-in, there's no private wire grid behind this. There is obviously a series of the LCT devices being connected and operated as a system.
Yeah. Okay. For fear of being substantially over the amount of time that we meant to have this webinar, knowing that I could talk about this for quite some time, I'm going to try and sort of move things on slightly. We have a couple of other slides. I suspect that these will largely have been covered, I think, in the sort of chat on the previous slide, but just sort of highlights the key unique point that we talked about, which is the sort of algorithm, if you can say the right word, that optimizes and sort of manages the various, as you say, low carbon technologies that are connected. And again, reiterate that this is on plot, so this is all on one house, not somewhere further up the system or elsewhere, I suppose.
Exactly. And that's, Matt, all I'd add on this is to say, look, the stuff that's in blue, right? This already exists, right? As a single home, you can already do all this stuff, and you can get a service provider to do it for you. What's new about the LEMA proposition is the orange bit, which is adding in a way for all of this to benefit the network and to enable, therefore, capacity for these homes to be built in the first place.
Yeah. Okay. We'll keep moving through then. We've talked about early connection grid and sort of increased effective capacity. That's what we talked about earlier in the slides. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes.
In terms of funded and unfunded
so this
models?
is a really interesting part. So obviously this relies on these low carbon technology assets being installed on a home, and whether that's a new build and therefore you're looking for someone to purchase and buy the home, whether it's social housing or whether this is a retrofit, those assets obviously come with a cost, right? And there's a payback on those assets over time. So what's interesting here is there are different ways in which those assets can be funded. So they can be built in as part of the home and sold with the home and owned by the consumers, or there are funded solutions as well, where a service provider will fund those assets and own them over time, but also be accountable for the maintenance, upgrade, upkeep, replacement, etc. So the DLA operates exactly the same either way around, but the proposition from the consumer is different. And so different developers, different consumers, different situations and locations, those different funded or unfunded models might be appropriate, and both exist, and there are service providers in the LEMA membership who can do both sides of this. So that there's optionality there, which is going to be an interesting part of the proposition.
Okay. I think that probably leads us into, I am going to skip through a few of these because I'm quite keen to talk about, if I can get these slides to move on. Oh, I've gone too far. I'm not sure I can get back. Can I get back? There we go. I'm quite keen to talk about this slide. So I know we've been talking, Ed, about sort of where LEMA is and where you are in the deployment and sort of how other organizations can get involved. I suppose you talked at the start of the presentation about your hope for this and your hope that it might lead to developer members or sort of other involvement. And I think we're keen to support you with the development of this as best we can with the knowledge that we have. So what, in the sort of short and medium term, what do you see as being sort of the next things for LEMA? And in an ideal world, who else would you hope to be involved in LEMA? What support do you think is needed to get this to a point where it's a solution that can be offered on a wider scale in more regions to more kinds of clients?
Yeah. So confidence for everybody is a really important part of this. So our focus in the short and medium term is really around building confidence. So taking the approach we've recently applied on the Pathfinder projects that I mentioned, learning from those and building the evidence and data that we need, as well as through research with consumers to support the proposition and to support confidence with the with the developer community, to support confidence with the network operators, to support confidence with the service providers who would support it, support confidence with local authorities and associations who might also be involved. That's a really important part of this. We are involved at the moment in a couple of rounds of government-funded projects. So one from UKRI and one from it's not really government, sort of network innovation funded opportunities to continue building evidence and doing that. But we're also talking to a number of organisations, and this is opportunities for people on the call here as well to be involved in actually continuing the sort of exploring the viability and benefits of smart local energy system applications in your areas where you've got this sort of problem facing your developments. And what I can say, we've heard this time and over when we've been talking to people, is the sooner the better, right? The sooner you look at this, the better. The farther you are down the track with planning a development and making commitments around build or how it's going to operate, it gets more difficult. So the sooner you can engage, the better. So it'd be great to hear from people who are interested in looking at this and exploring the viability. And as I mentioned earlier, through membership of LEMA as well. The more different, more diversity we can get in the LEMA membership, representing the needs of different stakeholders, ultimately the faster we'll be able to improve the proposition and build the confidence for it to be able to scale. So it would be great to get some new members as well.
Yeah, I think we've approached this currently is unlocked, I suppose, by you say it's community smart access that's the right word for it, isn't it? The
That's
product
right.
from SSE. Yeah. This is unlocked by that sort of.
And by the way, we're talking to 3 or 4 of the other DNOs as well who are really interested.
You've answered my question before me asking.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. So is it likely that for LEMA, trial sort of situations are going to open up in other DNOs areas, and we've largely talked here, and I imagine some of the people on the call will have interacted with you through your work in Bicester and Oxfordshire. So if we have developers with sites in other specific areas, are there areas where you're closer to being able to offer that and might seek a sort of trial site in other areas that people should be aware of currently, or is that something you can't sort of talk to at the moment?
No, absolutely. So be interested to talk in other areas. I know we're talking to UKPN, talking to NPG, and GET as well. So we're talking to a number of the different network operators. That some of them are closer. Some of them have got a whole kind of other set of priorities. I mean, all the network operators have got their own constraints and conditions they're working within. But we're getting a lot of interest to participate in this because they can all see how this can benefit and help. What they've got to do their reinforcement plans anyway, and doing the smart local energy system doesn't slow down or take away from them delivering their network reinforcement plan. They still have to do that, but they can see this as a way that they can release much earlier benefits for the local communities, which is something they're all under pressure from the regulator to do. So I would say if anyone's interested in exploring the potential, then please get in touch.
Ed, how can people reach you?
Yeah, well, first of all, you can have a quick look at the LEMA website. We are about to upgrade the website. It's probably not been really upgraded for a couple of years. It's not been our top priority, but it's lema.energy. So have a look at the website. There's a link on there to get in touch anyway. But if you want to email me directly, then please do so. Feel free to do so. My email is eh@lema.energy.
Okay, and you probably best catching me on LinkedIn, I would suspect, which I think almost everybody in the industry now uses. It's probably the easiest way. I am Matthew with 1 T, so just make sure you don't accidentally spell me the English way rather than the Welsh way. But yeah, I think that's probably it. So hopefully everybody found that interesting. I know I'm really interested in the LEMA solution, and hope to do some more work with Ed going forwards. But just thanks very much for joining, Ed. Do appreciate it. And
Thank you for having me.
see you all again. Thanks very much.
Cheers.